This video is on how to loom knit a cozy pair of legwarmers. These legwarmers have a garter stitch body and rib stitch borders. I'll walk you through each step. While I'm using a 28 peg large gauge Martha Stewart loom today, you can adapt this pattern for other round looms such as this 24 peg or 31 peg loom or any other size, as long as you adjust the kind of yarn you use and the number of rounds you make. So feel free to adapt this pattern for your own tools and for your own size. My name's Catherine, and I'd like to thank you for watching Ms. Yarn. If you haven't subscribed yet, you can click subscribe below so you don't miss out on any of my easy-to-follow knitting videos. Today we're going to cover number 1, how to mark your loom. Number 2, how to cast on. We'll use the chain cast on. Number 3, how to do the first rib stitch border. Number 4, how to do the garter stitch body. Number 5, how to do the last rib stitch border. And number 6, how to bind off. We'll use the Stretchy bind off. For the supplies, you're going to need a small round loom. I used a 28 peg extra large gauge loom, but you can use other sizes as I mentioned earlier. You'll need 1 bonus bundle ball of Wool Ease Thick and Quick yarn. That's 174 yards or 157 meters long. You'll need a hook, a pair of scissors, a yarn needle, and also stitch markers, which can be colored pegs, elastics, or tape, and this is to help you with the rib stitch borders. Let's mark peg 1. I have used blue elastic. You'll see that I'm alternating green pegs and pink pegs. Green is for knit stitches, and pink is for purl stitches. We'll do a knit 1, purl 1 sequence later, so these 2 different colors will tell us what to do. So go ahead and mark your own loom. To start the chain cast on, put a slip knot on peg 1. Let's put the tail in the middle of the loom. Hold the tail in the back with your left hand, and with your hook, dive into that first loop and grab the working yarn below. Pull it upwards to make a new loop, which goes behind peg 2. Feed the working yarn between pegs 2 and 3. Tighten that yarn to make a new loop. This loop goes behind peg 3. Next, you'll feed the working yarn between pegs 3 and 4 into that loop. Then you'll tighten it with your right hand to make a new loop, and you put that loop behind peg 4. Now you'll keep feeding your working yarn between the pegs and through those loops, and you'll do that all around the loom. Now you can continue on your own, and let's meet in a few minutes to finish the cast on. As you can see, I'm almost finished with my chain cast on. I've got the loop behind peg 27. I'm feeding my yarn through that loop. I have the loop now behind peg 28. I'm feeding the yarn through the loop for the last time. I have my last and final loop that I'm putting on peg 1. Then I'm going to pull on the working yarn to tighten things up. And now our cast on is done. Our rib stitch border is made up of 10 rounds of a knit 1, purl 1 sequence. So let's start by doing an E-wrap knit stitch on peg 1. We'll wrap peg 1 back to front, just above those 2 bottom loops. We knit over those 2 bottom loops, and if it's too tight, you can knit over 1 loop at a time. Let's purl on peg 2 since we're doing a knit 1, purl 1 sequence. So lay the working yarn below. With your hook, dive into that loop on peg 2. Grab the working yarn and pull upwards. Make a new loop. Take the old loop off of the peg and put the new loop on the peg. Now tighten. Do an E-wrap knit stitch on peg 3. Knit over the bottom loop. Purl on peg 4. These pink pegs are my stitch markers to show where I purl. I always use pink or purple for purl stitches since they start with the letter P. I'll also show you an optional shortcut. You can E-wrap pegs 5, 7, and 9 and other knit pegs, but you don't knit over right away. So I wrap peg 5, but I leave the 2 loops on it. I'm purling on peg 6. I'll wrap peg 7, but I won't knit over. I purl on peg 8. I'll wrap peg 9, but I won't knit over. And then I'll purl on peg 10. So my shortcut is to keep going like this all the way around the loom, and then to come back afterwards to do all of the knitting over. So here I'll show you what I mean. So I'm looking for pegs that have 2 loops on them. So I'll just knit them over all at once. So that's just one way to save time. You can either do this shortcut or you can knit and purl the regular way, which is to completely work each peg individually. In any case, you'll need to do 10 rounds of this rib stitch border. So you can knit on your own, and let's meet later when you're done. Now we've completed the 10 rounds of the first rib stitch border, and we're on round 11 to start the garter stitch. The garter stitch body is made up of a 2-row repeat. You're going to knit 1 round, and then you're going to purl the next round. And then you're going to keep alternating these rounds. So on all of our knit rounds, we're going to keep using the E-wrap knit stitch. So you can work your pegs individually, like I'm doing with pegs 1 and 2. Or you can do a few E-wraps at a time, like I'm doing with pegs 3, 4, and 5. And then I just knit over on all of those pegs at once. So I think you've got the hang of the E-wrap knit stitch, so just knit on your own until we're at the end of this round. Here I'm doing my final knit stitches on pegs 27 and 28, and now round 11 is done. For round 12, we're going to do purl stitches all the way around the loom. So let's talk about the pattern since you already know how to purl. Since we're alternating rounds of knit stitches and rounds of purl stitches, the next round, which will be round 13, you're going to knit, and then on round 14, you're going to purl, and so on. So in this pattern, the garter stitch body is made up of a total of 46 rounds. So that means that from round 11, which you've already done, to round 56, you're going to do the garter stitch. So at this point, let's knit on our own, and let's meet when we've completed round 56. At this point, we've completed the garter stitch body. Now we're ready to start round 57 for the last rib stitch border. I won't spend too much time on this step since it's a repeat of what you did for rounds 1 to 10. You're going to knit 1, purl 1 for 10 rounds. Your stitch markers will remind you of what stitch you need to do. So let's do this last rib stitch border on our own, and we'll meet later when it's time to bind off. We've done the last rib stitch border, and let's have a look at the work we've done so far. I also want to show you how much yarn I have left from this bonus bundle size of Woolies yarn. And that's to confirm that you should have enough yarn from this one big ball to make 2 leg warmers. So now we're ready for the stretchy bind off. We need to cut our yarn at this point, so wrap your loom 2 1/4 times. Then cut your yarn and thread your needle. For the stretchy bind off, you need to remember 3 words: down, up, behind. So with our yarn needle, let's go down peg 1. We go up peg 28 and behind peg 1. Next, we go down peg 2, up peg 1, and behind peg 2. So go down the peg on the left, go up the peg on the right, then go behind the peg on the left. I'll also show you how you can use your hook rather than your needle. So since I need to go down the next peg, I'm just going to place the working yarn above, and then I'm going to grab it from underneath and I'm going to pull it downwards. Okay, great. Now to go up the peg on the right, I'm just going to lay the working yarn below, and then I'm going to scoop it up from the top. It's almost like I'm doing a purl stitch. Okay, and there you go. Then I go behind the peg on the left, just like normal. So you can continue working your way all around the loom with this down, up, behind sequence, and let's meet in a few minutes. So here I've gone ahead and I'm almost done with the stretchy bind off. So I'll go down peg 28, up peg 27, then behind peg 28, and then my last up and down move is on peg 1. I just go down peg 1. Okay, excellent. So now it's time to take our leg warmer off the loom. So leave peg 1 for now. Let's start with peg 2 and just remove everything peg by peg. So now our leg warmer is off the loom. So let's stretch out our leg warmer and let's look at our work. I'm happy to say it looks cozy and thick. Okay, so this is right side out. Now we need to turn it inside out so that we can weave in the ends. So let's tighten the yarn a bit since the bind off edge loosened up a bit. And what we're going to do is weave the tail up this column. So I'm at the top of the column and I've reached the garter stitch body. So I'm going to cut the yarn and untwist those 2 plies. I'm threading the needle with 1 ply of that yarn and I'm inserting that into the fabric. Now I'm tying a knot with those 2 plies and I'm going to try to tighten all 4 strands, and then I'm going to snip off the ends. Now let's go to the other side of our leg warmer to the cast on edge, and we're going to thread our needle with that tail and we're going to weave the end up the column. So we're going to be weaving in this end just like we did with the tail from the stretchy bind off. So I've jumped ahead and now I'm at the top of the column and I'm going to untwist the 2 plies of the yarn. So I'll thread my needle with that ply and I'm going to insert it into the fabric. And then I'm going to tie a knot. And now my garter stitch leg warmer is done. So just turn this first leg warmer right side out and you'll make a second leg warmer with the rest of your yarn.